Did you know the risk of cancer does not stop at the scene of a fire? Firefighters are constantly exposed to diesel exhaust fumes and other airborne toxins that get trapped inside the station. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip through the combination of MagnaGrip exhaust removal systems and AirHawk air purification systems. Learn more at magnagrip.com.
Why, hello, everybody. So glad to have you joining me and listening into this episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department here on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. As always, thank you to Chief Bobby Halton and the fine folks at Fire Engineering and Clarion Events for hosting these podcasts, mine and all the other great ones that are out there. This is the podcast dedicated to our great volunteer fire service and committed to working to get our volunteer firefighters to embrace the message. And you hear me say it every month, right? Developing, displaying, and maintaining a professional image and reputation is the duty and responsibility of all of us. And true professionalism is not defined by a paycheck, but are very real examples of service and dedication and competency and courtesy and compassion. This is Tom Merrill, and I hope you're doing well as we navigate through these last few winter months. And remember, speaking of as we navigate through February here, halfway through the month, FDIC just a couple months away, and it's time to sign up for your hot classes or workshops or make arrangements to come midweek for the classroom session and, of course, the awesome trade show. But either way, head over to FDIC.com for all the information you'll need to help you get signed up for, again, what is the greatest firefighter show of the year. FDIC 2022, which is the week of April 25th to the 30th in Indianapolis, and I certainly hope to see you there. And if you're going, please shoot me a note. Make sure our paths cross so we can soak up the great sisterhood and brotherhood of our fire service. That's what makes it so great, isn't it? And if you're going to be there for hot or workshops, I'd love to see you in my class, the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, which is scheduled for Tuesday, April 26th from 8 a.m. till noon. Love to see you there. Love to talk about this great fire service of ours, share stories of success, share stories of challenges that we're working on. So shoot me a note. Let me know if you're coming, and we'll make sure we cross paths. And like I said, stop in my class. I'd love to meet you. Head over to FDIC.com. You can learn more. You can start picking your classes. And remember, also, I mentioned on the last show, one really cool thing this year is your registration is also going to apply for the regular fire lineup, but they've got a new GEMS EMS lineup as well, which is really cool. GEMS, as you probably know, is the Journal of Emergency Medical Services, and they're also going to have some really cool, awesome EMS hot classes as well. So check it out. Go to FDIC.com and hope to see you in Indy the week of April 25th to the 30th. Man, it'll be here before you know it. I've been out talking about our great volunteer fire service and discussing the issues and challenges that we are all facing. I'm always learning new things. Matter of fact, last week, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the Missouri Winter Fire School in Columbia, Missouri. I want to thank Tracy Gray and all the other great people associated with that great conference. Had an opportunity to meet many, many new people and talk to volunteers from all over. And my gosh, we shared some very common concerns and experiences and talked about things we're trying back home. And that old line came back up again. You know, we're all from the same circus. We just have different clowns. You know, we do share a lot of similar challenges and obstacles. And it was really time well spent. And everybody I talked to exemplified that fantastic sisterhood and brotherhood that we love about this fire service. Everybody exemplified true professionalism. And I got to tell you, this was a very well organized. It was a very classy conference with a ton of great instructors. I hung out. I was a fly on the wall, just soaking up the knowledge that was being passed on by so many great instructors that were there and brought in by Tracy Gray and all the other great leaders down there in Missouri. And if you get a chance to go to this conference next year, I highly recommend it. So thanks to all the great people in Missouri for that fantastic hospitality and the invitation to be down there. And next month, the end of March, I'm going off to the Penske Law Conference, which is here in my home state of New York. And then I'll be going off to North Dakota. I'll be headed down to Florida toward the middle part of the year. It's going to be a busy several months, but also an awesome several months, all dedicated to talking about this great wonderful, iconic fire service that we belong to. I got several new presentations I'm working hard on. Premiered one locally to some brothers and sisters at the Depew Fire Department, which is close to my hometown, and was really excited to put this one together and share it. It's professionalism, passion, and pride. Had a large group of firefighters who were into it. Great group there. We talked about being a professional. We talked about having passion for the job, and we talked about being proud of what we do and also proud of our incredible history and accomplishments, both as a fire service, but also in our own individual departments. And I like to point out a lot that, pride is our only pay. Who doesn't want to be a proud professional volunteer firefighter, right? And sometimes we need to take a step back and look at what we have to be proud of. And again, collectively as a fire service, but also back home in our own individual departments. And that's what I like to point out in that presentation: professionalism, passion, and pride. So lots going on, several more presentations to launch. I'll be talking more about those, but I wanted to get into this episode, which is actually related to what I spent a lot of time talking about with plenty of volunteers down in Missouri, and that's recruitment and retention and what we're doing to direct efforts at helping in all those areas. And for today's show, it's my privilege to welcome back Jerry Knapp, who was with us back in November, and it's great to have him back with us talking on another great topic and a very, very important topic. Jerry is a 45-year veteran firefighter with the West Haverstraw, New York Fire Department. He's a training officer with the Rockland County Fire Training Center. He does a lot, and you all probably know his name, whether it's from being involved in engine ops and nozzle know-how on the highly acclaimed Brass Tacks and Hard Facts Engine Company video series. Probably you've read many of his articles in Fire Engineering or seen his work in the Fire Attack chapter in Fire Engineering's Handbook for Firefighter 1 and 2, or maybe you've been to one of his presentations anywhere around the country or at FDIC. The man gets around, and I'm honored to have him here with us tonight. And as I said, he was with us back in November when we had a great discussion with a lot of good feedback too from our listeners regarding gas emergency calls. And we're going to be reaching out to you listeners again today on this episode because we want to hear, and he needs feedback from you on the topics we're going to be covering. Jerry was recently appointed to a task force. I think he's one of 9 who are appointed to a task force that's looking at all aspects of volunteer fire department recruitment. Now, it's a New York task force, but that's okay. There's a lot of things here that are going to cover that we're going to talk about that apply nationwide. It's more generic than you might think, even though it's a New York task force. So we're going to focus on several key areas in the recruitment and retention realm. And he's here to talk about the task force and offer some ideas to hopefully improve recruitment and retention efforts in our nationwide and worldwide volunteer fire service. And again, even though it's New York State, the issues and challenges and possible solutions are definitely not limited by geography. They apply to us everywhere. So last time he was here, we talked tactics and strategy for gas emergency incidents. And I guess for this show, we're going to shift focus not on emergency scene incidents, but hey, let's talk tactics and strategy for successful recruitment and retention in the volunteer fire service. And again, he's very interested to hear from you, our listeners. So we'll be giving out his contact info, and we want to know what your thoughts and ideas are and what's working and what's not working, because he's going to take it to this task force and hopefully put together some great information. So Jerry, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you here. And I'm excited to talk about this subject because I think it's so important.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me again. And I think it's a couple of things. These are universal to the volunteer fire service. So although we're, the target's New York, you can just substitute any state. The other issue is I don't think it's recruiting and retention. I think we've misnamed it. It's how do you make your department an elite unit or a high-speed unit? Everybody wants to be a member of the Green Berets or the SEALs. Why? Because they're elite units. So the question is, how do we make our fire departments elite units? And I think we're starting to find some good ideas toward that.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about this task force? What's it all about? How it was created? How'd you get involved?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I was asked to, I was one of 9 people selected across the state to be a member of this task force. There's other members as well, the Commissioner of Education, Obviously, all the fire associations, the FASNY has representation. FASNY is the Firemen's Association of State of New York. The New York State Chiefs Association also is represented. So there's a kind of, I think there's 24, 25 of us all together, but there's 9 what I call fire guys and gals on the task force. By law, we are tasked with 6 things to look at. First is firefighter training. Just generally, what can we do to make that better? What's strong, what's weak, what do we keep, what do we change? The second objective is looking at the community colleges and/or BOCES to run or create new training programs. The third option, which I thought was very interesting, is the feasibility of a dedicated bureau for recruiting and retention. So here in New York, we have a state level government agency, the Office of Fire Prevention and Control, and they're looking at a dedicated branch for recruiting and retention. And while I'm on that topic, I think that's a great idea. I think it should be called the Leadership Development Branch. In my mind, it doesn't make any sense to continue to bring guys in, gals in, have them dissatisfied and leave the fire service for whatever reason, good or bad, or maybe just things they can't control. So I think that should be a leadership development branch. I think if we solve those problems or we improve the leadership in our volunteer fire service, most of the other problems get minimized. The fourth objective is tax incentives and frankly, money issues. The fifth objective is to analyze recruitment and retention programs that are successful and kind of come up with a list of what's been working around the state. And I think that's kind of ironic because the whole purpose of the task force is to improve that. So the bottom line is, and in our preliminary discussions, a lot of what we're doing is not working. So that's kind of an interesting challenge and it's fun. The last is to identify recruitment and incentives. How do we get people to come into our fire service? And then, of course, how do we keep them?
Awesome. It's funny. I just every day, like most firefighters out there, I peruse the websites and get the latest information. And I mean, it's every day you read about the challenges of that we're having in the volunteer fire service. And just for our listeners that maybe aren't aware, just 20, 30 years ago, let's say the beginning of this century, even we'll keep it simple, there was over 825,000 volunteer firefighters in the United States. And by 2016, the number dropped almost down to the 700,000 range. It's gone up slightly. I guess newer studies are showing we're about the 750,000 point now in numbers, which is great. But the attitude that recruits are always going to be there to come through the door is really something of the past. And that was the gist of this article that came out yesterday. And along with the people power issues are the call volume is increasing dramatically across the country as well. A lot of challenges there. You've mentioned leadership, and I don't know where you want to start with what you're going to be working on, but I thought this applied so cool because I know leadership's a big thing that you're passionate about. In this article yesterday, I highlighted it. Leaders must be informed and involved. They must show members equal reward and discipline. There's a dichotomy there when you're a leader in any organization, but in the fire service, which is paramilitary for certain. So I think I'm going to do a multiple part series on this because I've got a lot of emails from people from over the years talking about this issue. I got some guests lined up that have had success, and I'd want to hear from them. I got one maybe next month that's going to be on. I'll talk about that in a minute. So where do you want to start, Jerry? Are you focusing on all 6 of these areas? Are you committed to 1 or 2 of them? How's this going to work out?
I'm kind of personally committed to, I'm on a subcommittee. And so we're looking at retention. What do we do to make our fire departments better so we do not have a retention problem? How do we want to make people stay in our departments? So one of the key things, and I'll tell you real quick how I learned this. Almost 10 years, well, a little over 10 years ago now, I was operating a gas emergency. Make a long story short, the house blew up. Myself and my captain were almost killed. So I looked at that and I said, how could I was a really well-trained guy and I was assistant chief of the hazmat team. I thought I knew what I was doing. And the fact was, I had a training gap. I did not know what I did not know about that gas leak, and it almost killed me. So as I looked at that about leadership, and Tom and I were talking about this just before we went on the air here, a good firefighter, a good EMT, a good driver, whatever, in a volunteer service gets either appointed or elected to an officer position, right? Now he or she is in a job they're really not trained to do. They did really well as a line firefighter, EMT, paramedic, driver, whatever it might be. Now they're in a job and they have responsibilities and missions that they're not trained to do. So I think the key is we need to set standards for training and our officers. And then so it's easy to say what, and I'm looking at, and I know you guys can't see these, but for example, New York State, we have 5 or 6 pages of recommended best practices for fire department training programs. And I think it's 6 pages long. So that says what, and that's terrific. It doesn't say how. So how does Joe Captain in an average volunteer fire department know how to run a training program? Just like me at the gas call, I didn't know what I didn't know. Joe Captain doesn't know what he doesn't know, but he's expected to perform, right? So now there's this expression, if your only tool is a hammer, everything's a nail. So just think about that for a minute, right? So Joe now, who has the best of intentions, he's a lieutenant, new captain, whatever it might be. He's got these new responsibilities. He's got the best intentions. He's got the best motivation. He's proud of his position, but he's really not ready for it. So if we carry it over to the military side, if you want to be a squad leader, you take the squad leader class before, and you successfully pass that before you get to be a squad leader, right? So I always make the analogy. Do you think the Air Force takes a cadet at the Air Force Academy and puts him in the seat of an F-16 and says, let's see how he does? No, of course not, because he's going to crash that $20 million airplane, right? But we put a guy or gal in the seat of an officer or a house officer or a line officer, whatever it might be. And we go, okay, well, let's see how Tom's going to do. Well, maybe Tom does really good, and that's a good thing. Or maybe Tom doesn't do so good just because he's not trained. He's not a bad guy. He's not, he doesn't have any bad characteristics, but now he's trying to do the best he can. So I think in a nutshell, so the bottom line, Tom, is I think we need to show, I call it guys, people in the fire service, how to do these things. How do you run a training program? So
yeah. Well, why don't we start with leadership there then, and some of your ideas, and also again, listeners, please, we'll get contact info out a few times during the show. Reach out with your ideas, what you know is working, isn't working. But yeah, I always say, and I say this, I have a volunteer leadership class that I do, and I talk about it in my professional presentation. The skills and whatever people see in you that gives them the confidence to elect you. And let's face it, most volunteer firehouses, it's an election. That's a whole nother show someday, maybe, but they'll get you elected or appointed to that officer position, administratively or on the line. It doesn't matter. But those skills aren't the skills that are going to sustain you. You might be I call it the Superman or Superwoman firefighter. They're incredibly talented. They're a fantastic EMT, paramedic, nozzle firefighter, ladder operator, whatever. And the company membership says, oh, I really think this person would make a good lieutenant, a good captain, a good chief, or they're on a board, or they show really good astute administrative skills. They'd be great on our board or as our president, but now they get elected or appointed, and it's a whole nother ball game. And some of them struggle mightily. They get elected or appointed, but not the next year. And then you hear the disgruntledness. You hear, I have more certificates and training than anybody, and they won't elect me or appoint me. And it leads to hard feelings. And then you lose this good member in some cases. But I say to these people, this is where you got to step back and look in the mirror a little bit sometimes. You got to go down deep, dig down inside yourself too. And okay, no one's questioning your talents and skills on the fire ground or at the emergency scene or at the medical call, but why don't you question yourself on what maybe you can do to get a little bit better? So, and then you get into your ideas, which are fantastic, and you're going to get the old pushback time. So what are you seeing how to overcome some of this? Is what you're looking at with your ideas, like the paramilitary idea there, maybe a solution to helping these people become better leaders?
Well, again, I think it comes back to, we've got to show them how to do it. And I think in the volunteer side, I've recognized something. It's kind of a blinding flash of the obvious. For the last 4 years, I've been doing my tactical response to natural gas emergencies. And I only do that on the weekends. I do it on Saturday or Sunday. And what I found is the students are a lot more alert. They're a lot more willing to be there. They're not looking at their watch going, I got to go home. I got to go to work tomorrow. So this idea of training at night, although it may be our only option, it's not the best option. So maybe we look at weekend training. One of the initiatives I'm pushing through the task force, and we'll have to see if the rest of the committee agrees with this. Certainly, this is at this point, it's just my idea, pie in the sky, is that the Office of Fire Prevention and Control develops, instead of a recruiting branch, a leadership development branch, and essentially uses the military model for training people. Now, that being said, we're volunteers. I got it. We're not Marines. We're not soldiers. So one of the things I proposed was local regional conferences 2 or 3 times a year that are coordinated by OFPC at the local regional level. So we just had this discussion on the task force on Monday. Was Long Island has different needs than the Tom's area, like up by the Finger Lakes or in the North Country or whatever. So there obviously there's generic leadership issues, personnel management, and those kind of things. So this conference would be, I guess, like almost like a mini FDIC for either 1 or 2 days on a Saturday or Sunday with local experts, and the topic is focused on whatever it might be. And I'll give you an example. Recruiting. We have to do a better job recruiting. Okay, that's the what. So if somebody comes to me and says, Jerry, design a recruiting program for your fire department, I don't know how to do that. It's just not my area of expertise, and it's probably nobody else's area of expertise in the firehouse. So I said, well, who's good at recruiting? The Marines are good at recruiting, right? So what does a Marine recruiter look like? He's the sharpest Marine there is. He's got military creases in his shirt or his blouse, right? That'll cut you. He's got a chest full of ribbons. He's a cool looking guy, right? So what does the fire department send out for recruiting? An old fat guy who's got time to do it. I'm not picking on the old fat guys. Look, I'm a no hair, gray hair group as well, right? But we need to know how to recruit. So why don't we hook up with the military, and maybe one of these regional sessions is, hey, this is how the Marines recruit. Maybe you, the fire service, can use some of these techniques. So this week I am going to the recruiter who's going to laugh at me when I walk into the recruiting station. He's going to go, son, you're way too old. Get out. And I'm going to go, that's not why I'm here, Sergeant. I'm here to learn from you. And I'll have his attention. So the partnership here, I think, is important. So what does he doesn't care about the volunteer fire service. He could give a hoot less, right? But when I tell him, hey, Sergeant, or hey, Gunny, I can put you in front of some people that may want to join the Marines or join the Army, he might go, oh yeah, this could be a mutually beneficial thing. So we'll learn from him. He'll gain some benefit from this as well. And maybe, and again, I think the key is we, the fire service, have to go outside to find the area of expertise that we want to develop,
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking too, it's kind of a two-way street there with the military. How about a partnership where they talk to members getting out of the service too about how to continue their service? And it's a second way of volunteering. You did 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. When you go back home, if it's served by volunteers, here's some information. That's an idea that I don't know if that's been breached too often, but I why not, right? It's think outside the box sometimes, right?
So I have a friend, Dan Moran. Dan's our hazmat coordinator for the county. He was a research chemist. So his mind is like wide open, right? So he goes, Jared, you never know where this stuff is going to take you. And Tom, that's just what you were saying. We start with this spark, and who knows how big the fire gets,
Yeah. It reminds me too of some recruitment and retention tips I received once. And it's true. Sometimes you have a recruitment event at a high school, and the ones going, and this is no disrespect to anybody, they're the only ones around, but it's 60, 70, 50-year-old men and women. They're not going to be able to relate to these high school kids. So try and mix it in, or send your younger men and women, even boys and girls, if you have juniors, talk about the fun and the experience and the common good that you
Yeah.
can do for your community.
And I think that's the other marketing side, Tom, that we've missed. We were talking about this before we went on the air here. There are so many things you can learn from your volunteer service in the firehouse. You know, life-saving skills, life skills, how to deal with people. Tom mentioned something about, you know, how to conduct an inventory, how to run a training program. So just real quick, there's a fellow in my department, Mike Dolan. He's our company president. He's been the president for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years now. And my company is doing exceptionally well because Mike is a businessman. He's responsible for a number of stores. So in the area. So his company has trained him in personnel management. So because of that business-oriented personnel management skill that he brings to the firehouse, our company is doing exceptionally well. And it's because of him.
Right. Now his challenge is, how does he prepare the next president? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll give you a quick example of that. And and he's called me in the office and he go, "Hey, Jerry, we got to talk about something. Nothing personal. Let me just tell you, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh man, I didn't realize I was doing that," or whatever it was, you know? And he does that with everybody. And that's a tough skill to learn, but he's been trained to do it. So he's okay. You know, I mean, you know, take the other side of that. The captain calls you in and goes, "Hey, look, you're an idiot. We don't want you doing that stuff no more. Cut it out." You know, well, Jerry's probably going to leave the fire department.
Right.
You know? But
and who out there hasn't seen that? Who hasn't seen that, right? How does that affect the crew, right? It's not good.
Every tool, if the only tool you got is a hammer, everything's a nail, you know. So
yeah, for sure. You know, gosh, and I talked about that. I talk about that in my class too, just about, and I always say it's not, some of this isn't rocket science. So you don't need an advanced degree for some of this. What you just said about how to talk to someone, not begrudge them in front of other people, and how you do it. It does take a skill and finesse. But number one, I think you got to be able to reach inside and tell yourself, this is how you do it. And if you got to train yourself to do it, train yourself to do it. If not, don't be frustrated with the results you're getting. Go through.
But so let's go back to the how for a second.
Yeah.
So imagine we're at this Saturday conference and it's on, say, one of the topics that we're going to talk about for an hour, 2 hours is counseling, right? So I had a boss, he said to me one day, he goes, "Come on, I have to counsel you." I'm like, "Captain Smith, what did I do?" He goes, "You didn't do anything wrong." He goes, "This is just your annual counseling. So that I can tell you, you know, where you're good, where you need to improve, what you need to sustain." I'm like, "Oh, man, I thought you were going to like fire me or something, you know?" So that you're right, Tom, that whole counseling thing is so important. So go back to the how. So we're at this Saturday conference and it's on counseling, say an hour or two session. Maybe it's just a simple role play, kind of like we just did. So in a matter of a few minutes, maybe sometimes even a few seconds, you can show Captain Joe, who now has to counsel somebody. Oh, he goes, "Oh, just like you said, this ain't rocket science. I can do this." I don't have to yell at Tom. I go, "Hey, Tom, come. This isn't personal. This is about your behavior, or this is about something you did really good, or this is what we want you to continue." You know, so
yeah. What do you? It's unique. If these weekend conferences to focus on leadership skills and traits, what are some of the other areas you think they could really cover? I mean, I guess no one really teaches. I use this example all the time. No disrespect intended to any treasurers out there, but no one really teaches a lot of these treasurers how to do the job. I guess there's really no end to what we could think of for these outreach programs. What are some of your ideas, or what's the task force looking at, or what would you like to see them look at?
Well, we're just, again, everybody wants to say what to do, but they don't want to say how.
Yeah.
So your point is exactly right. What do we focus on? How do we teach these leadership skills? So obviously tactics and strategy. I think, house fires, single family dwelling fires are 55% of working fires. 3/4 of the people that die in their own house.
Yep.
So tactics and strategy certainly is a
where
big
most
part.
firefighter injuries occur.
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking before we went on about, fellow falling through the floor. So yeah. So, tactical things, energy, the energy storage systems, lithium ion batteries, what problems are there in the fire service and how do we fix those? running a training program. So typically in my county, the captain of the fire department or company is responsible for training. How does that guy know how to run a training program, right? How does he know?
Congratulations, Captain. Your first day. I'll start planning drills next week.
Exactly. So what happens? You show up at Monday night, Tuesday night, whatever drill night is, and he's going, yeah, let's see. What do you want to do? Oh, we're going to wash the trucks tonight. Oh, really? That's a real training value to that, you know? So one of the things I learned, I worked at West Point for 33 years, 10 months and 8 days. And I learned that we have to protect the training time for our guys. So training time is not washing the trucks. Training time is perfecting your skill. I want to go back to recruiting for a second. Like we talk about open houses, right? So what do we typically do? We put a car in the middle of the parking lot and 3 of our heroes go tear the door off and we keep people 50 feet away. I'm like, no, put the extrication tool in their hands, tell them where not to cut their fingers off on this thing, watch them closely and let them use the jaws. I remember years ago, we did open house and I said, I want to stretch a hose line. I want to let the people hold the nozzle. Hold the nozzle. You want to let them hold the nozzle? Well, yeah. And so again, as a recruiting and as a tool, they get to see that stuff. So maybe when we're at that high school that Tom talked about before, instead of being in the auditorium, we go out in the parking lot and we go, here, kid, push this button. You can tear the door off of this car with this, And now the kid's like, holy crap, this is really cool, right? Put a nozzle.
Why do I see some listeners cringing right now? Like,
yeah. So, but why are they doing that? Well, we can't let that kid do that. Well, why not? You want to recruit him, right? So I go back to the military analogy, right? Go back to the how. So you're on a rifle range. This is the first time you've ever had an M16 in your hand. And the drill sergeant says, okay, here's what you have to do. You have to put a hole in that paper target 50 meters away. Figure it out yourself. No, he tells you how each little step to do. So that's what I see these conferences doing. And I don't see it as being 8 hours of, like personnel management. Maybe it's an hour of personal management. Maybe it's an hour of treasury stuff. Maybe it's an hour of tactics and strategy, or maybe they're focused on particular topics, house topics, scene topics, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
maybe one topic can be extrication, for a whole day,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any limit to the little breakouts that you could do and areas that you could focus on. And what I like to say is putting it together is one thing, great idea. Getting people there is a challenge. And the other challenge is getting people to embrace the information that they're being provided. But I say part of being a professional is understanding how important it is to understand the role you're expected to play in your volunteer firehouse and to do things legally, ethically, within the rules and spirit of the game. And I harp on this all the time, back to the tactics and strategy. If you're going to be in the fire service, you've got to remain a student of the game. You've got to be paying attention to what's going on. You've got to watch out for your sisters and brothers back at the firehouse and know what's happening and go to training. And, just because you get promoted to whatever position it is you're at doesn't mean the training stops. And that comes from within. You've got to, if you're not doing that, then I don't understand why you're even accepting the role, because you want to be successful. It's far easier to be successful and have an energy or highly efficient, energized team than to be walking around complaining about everybody, saying, I can't get anyone to do anything. Everyone's quitting. We have no manpower or people power. So, you lead a horse to water. You can't teach them to drink.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the challenge, is getting people to go and then getting them to embrace the message of what's being preached to them.
I do. I think at this point, there almost has to be a requirement. We need to set the standard somehow. And again,
you want to go there? You want to go into that little dicey area of requirements for officers?
I do. I do. I think we have to. Who do you want coming to help your family? Do you want some guy with the best of intentions, or do you want a dude that knows what he's doing? The issue is, and Tom mentioned this before, that if we set requirements for officers, who are we going to get? I think the fire service steps up all the time. And I mean, it's just in our nature to do that. Again, I don't think they need to be excessive requirements, but there needs to be a standard. And again, if we look at the military model, we like to say we're paramilitary. Well, we're paramilitary until we have to meet a standard, you know. So for a Marine, for example, he has to take to be a career Marine. First, he has to go through officer candidate school. That's the standard. That's one level. Then he goes to, I think it's called the basic course, which tells him what he needs to do to be a lieutenant and be a platoon leader. Then he moves on. I think it's called the amphibious warfare class, which is kind of at the next level of leadership there. So if you're not meeting these standards, you're not getting promoted. So there's a level, at least some standardized level. And, you know, as Harry Carter always says, what we do is only a matter of life and death. And I add to that, yeah, ours. So one of the ways I think that, Tom, we get people to come, and as this develops, as these officers in development come, and firefighters, doesn't need to be limited to officers, as people understand, oh, there was this volunteer in wherever that fell through the floor and died. Holy cow, this is serious business. So I think I agree with you. We have to have that perpetuating motion in the right way.
Yeah, for sure. I go back, I've read a lot of articles on this. We've had Facebook posts on this, and it's always, you know, you get passionate people taking both sides to that discussion about, but I believe there's a middle ground here. I really do.
There is.
I think you got to have some minimum standards for whatever the position is.
Mhm.
But having come from this conference I was just at in Missouri, I met some great, passionate professional firefighters who have very limited resources as far as people goes. And if you put standards in, they might not have anyone fill the office. And that's going to be the big pushback. That is the big pushback you hear when this subject comes up. And that's a tough egg to crack. It really is. You know, it's a dichotomy. You know, you need to have certain minimum qualifications, but you also need to have people that are going to want to step foot into the office or are there to step foot into the office. So that's a tough thing to crack there. It really is. But
it is.
That's where the recruitment comes in, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, we just can't look at this in stovepipe sections. I think one of the most important things that we're seeing here in Rockland County is, and we're well funded, and you know, we complain about everything like everybody else, but we're really lucky here in Rockland, right? There's a focus on firefighter one. So pretty much for our 26 departments, I don't know how this is in other areas of the country, but if you haven't finished firefighter one or your recruit level training, you pretty much can't go to a fire, or you can go and stand there and watch, right? You can't really, which is where it should be. But as we just said earlier on, Joe gets elected to be a lieutenant or captain. Now there's no requirement for training for him. So why is it always easy to pick on the little guy and pick on the lowest ranking person we've got and say, hey, John, you've got to do this, otherwise you can't be a fireman. But once you're an officer, you know, look, God doesn't open your skull and flow in everything you need to know to be an officer. It's a struggle. Just like that firefighter one is struggling to get through his recruit class. You know, you need to meet the standard. I think, Tom, it's as simple as that, you know.
And some of it's common sense. I'll give you an example. I've heard from people, I've actually gotten emails and had personal discussions with people. Honestly, I just heard it this past week or 2 weeks ago, that there's a chief officer who doesn't go to any training drills at the firehouse. Now, I say to that firehouse, you've got to have minimum standards. You've got to have a set of bylaws or rules, and they do, but they're not enforced. There's a problem there. And I hate to use this term common sense, but common sense would dictate that a governing board or somebody would call this person in on the carpet to say, hey, we have these bylaws. We all have to live up to them. Doesn't matter if you're chief, president, or the probationary member. These are what the bylaws say. You can always change bylaws, but if someone's not meeting your bylaws, there's got to be a call to the carpet to discuss.
Consequences,
you're not looking to be a jerk or anything like that, but you've got to have that discussion. Then you hear And someone will tell you this. Well, the family owns the different, ranks in the firehouse. The mother's the president and the father's the chief and the son or the lieutenant isn't going to any drills and they're not going to do anything about it. And that's a problem. And I hear that all the time. I hear that all.
Mhm.
And that's why I say to the fire company, then take a step back, get some people together and re-examine your values and how
Mhm.
your operation is going to run, basically.
Right. But I think we get, Tom, that's a perfect example. We get so focused on our own little world, right? In our own little fire company. And I think for me, FDIC has just been absolutely huge because you get to see, and my mom used to say, hey, Gerald, you got to see how the other half lives. So when you go to FDIC or you get out of your local area, you go, hey, look, these guys are doing blah, blah, blah. And Tom, similar to what you said about, going to, where was it, Michigan or Minnesota, where you went
Missouri.
for Missouri. I was in South Dakota. I got invited last summer to do a presentation in South Dakota. They have no state fire organization. So they organize these local conferences themselves. They have 3 or 4 a year. They're broken down into regions. In this particular conference, the high school swim team provided lunch. So they made money, right? The community was there. They brought in trainers from across the country. And I was, obviously, I got there and set up my class early. So these two fellows come in and I said, guys, I'm not starting for another hour. You don't need to hang around here. And they're like, no, we're just resting. We got up at 2 this morning, drove 4 hours to get here. And, so we're just going to hang out and rest for a little bit. I'm like, man, that's dedication.
Yeah.
So to your question, and super valid, how do we get people to come to these? Once Joe, new Joe Captain comes to this class and he says, hey, look, I just learned how to deal with a bad actor in my department, or I just learned how to give an award, or I just learned how to set up an annual training plan for my department. So, Tuesday night on drill night, I don't have to be scratching my head going, oh crap, what are we going to do? So when they, just like you said, you learn so many things in the volunteer fire service, that guy gets better, that captain, that officer gets better, his department gets better, and that department turns into an elite organization,
Right.
And again, I use my own company in Volunteer Hose here in West Harrisburg. We get a great president, and he has led us and kept us operating at that level because he's had that training. And like you said, it's common sense. Common sense ain't so common,
Right. The power
Yeah.
of persuasion. It really is. And, people need to understand, and as much as there's so much value to the online resources, thank you for listening to this podcast, by the way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, there's tremendous value in, as I say, you've got to stay involved in what's happening in the fire service, preaching to the choir, because people are listening to this podcast. But power of persuasion, we've got to talk to our members, those that aren't doing it, and get them to understand the value of not just checking out what's going on in the fire service, but networking and getting out of, as you said, your
Mhm.
own bubble, your own neighborhood as
Mhm.
often as possible. It doesn't have to be an expensive trip like FDIC or going to
Mhm.
South Dakota. Look what's in your area. There's maybe these regional ideas, but there's usually local training seminars and events. And you
Mhm.
know what I used to say too, and how about night schools? If you're going to be doing treasurer's work or secretary's work, there's all sorts of night schools. Well, pre-COVID there was, I'm sure they'll come back, to help you foster skills in Excel and word
Mhm.
processing and whatever else it might be.
Mhm.
Take advantage of those and just understand you don't learn everything online. It's great to get out, take classes, network with people, and the ideas you will come up with and hear about that are successful will blow you away. And every time you do it, you'll walk away having met a new friend, because that's how we
Yeah.
are in the fire service, right?
Oh yeah. 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 It's amazing. I just tell you a quick story, and um, we I want to say this is probably back 2004 to 2005. We started, a couple of us got together and did some research on nozzles. And one of the things that we started out with was, um, I was always told you have to operate the nozzle in a clockwise way to drive the fire and smoke heat away from you. So I just thought about that and went, I wonder why that is. And I wonder why, I wonder if it's true. So we set up a device to be able to test the airflow. So what we learned is if we turn the nozzle clockwise, the air moves away from you at a certain rate, right? If you turn the nozzle counterclockwise, the air moves away from you at the exact same rate. So we kind of did some down-home research and said, hey, this, so we published an article for fire engineering. Actually, we published 3 for fire engineering about airflow caused by nozzle movement and straight and fog streams. So fast forward to February 3rd. Well, let me back up for a second. From that article, I got picked up to be on the Underwriters Laboratories fire attack study as a panel member, as a tech panel member, which was what a huge learning experience. And those guys, Keith Stakes and Robin Zavotek and Steve Kerber, I know these guys on a first name basis. They're just fire service geniuses. So we did 28 live burns. They did most of the work. We did most of the watching. And came up with the fire attack study, how best to attack a residential fire. So that was a huge thing. And I learned so much from that, right? So fast forward to February 3rd, 2022, which was just a few days ago. It was 5-6 days ago now. UL, Keith Stakes, and I call it his boys, his research team have developed a kind of a portable prop to demonstrate the proper nozzle techniques and what your nozzle does in the fire area. So first, I want to put a plug in for them. Go to ulfirefightersafety.com and look at that engine company prop. But again, the point of all this is we've got to get outside of our bubble. We've got to use the experts to make ourselves better. And while I'm talking about UL, I was just looking at one of their press releases. They just hired a person called a research amplification specialist. I'm like, what in the world is that? Yeah. I'm like, what? Never even heard of it. So part of her duties are she has 2 decades of marketing and communications experience with corporations and startup manufacturers. And she has a passion for helping brands successfully elevate their identities and increase their awareness to their customers. So again, for the fire service, maybe we hire somebody to sell us. Tom mentioned all the different things that are a benefit to the member that comes into the company that you personally and professionally learn. We need to sell that. So we're recruiting. We don't, instead of going, oh, your community needs you, please come out at 2:00 in the morning to answer a false alarm. People are going to go, hell, I'm doing that. But if we go, hey, you join this group of, this volunteer fire department, here's some of the things you're going to learn. Here's what you can apply to your family. Here's what you can apply to your business. And oh, by the way, you're going to learn life-saving skills. And oh, by the way, if you want to rappel off a building, we can probably do that too. And, if you want to save somebody's life, there's pretty rewarding, little pride in that, as Tom talked before. We can show you that too. So now you got a person that's like, oh yeah, man, that's an elite organization. I'd like to join that, And yeah, by the way, you're going to go to a false alarm at 2:00, but sorry.
Yeah, I think sometimes we get hung up on the fire end of things, which is obviously so important, but I think we need to brand ourselves differently and be honest with what you're going to be doing. But as you said, at the same time, you're being honest about the 3 a.m. call. Let them know about those life skills they're going to be picking up as well, and being part of an extended family, and then all the other great things that come with being a member. And I think sometimes we just focus, and you see it in a lot of the advertising videos, fire.
Oh, please come. Yeah. Well, so here's the other thing. So you go to a 1-room fire, right? You're the nozzleman on a 1-room house fire, right? So instead of focusing on, we put this fire out, you just saved a $200,000-$400,000 house. That's a pretty big accomplishment in your pocket. Not everybody can do that.
So. Right. So you talked with the committee about, or your ideas about training and, the outreach programs, the weekend training ideas, getting training so to help training officers put drills together back home. I think I read something else that you were thinking of talking about, and that was taking advantage of community colleges and people that are already instructors and having us get some training from them. Was that something that you were looking at or considering talking about?
Yeah, Tom, it is. And again, OFPC, I don't want anything that I say to be disparaging OFPC. I think New York, they've done a tremendous job. Um, but but again, the world changed a little bit, so maybe it's time to look at some new things. Um, for example, here in Rockland, we have a great fire training center. We also have a community college like 10 miles away. So why are we not pulling in those educators to say, hey, how do we educate the 20-year-old? How do we educate the 30-year-old? How do we educate the 40-year-old? How do we educate the 50 and 60-year-old, to do whatever? Because there's different learning techniques there. Um, if we haven't trained a trainer to be a trainer and the training programs aren't good, people, just like you said, Tom, oh man, that training program sucks. I'm not coming to that.
Right.
Don't waste my time. I always use for what I always use as the litmus test for training is, am I telling a guy what I want him to do on the fire ground or wherever, and is that useful to him? And if it's not, I try not to talk about it. And you do the same thing in your professional volunteer program. If it's not useful to them, I'm wasting their time.
Right. Right. So true. And I think the biggest obstacle that's going to come up in any of this again is what a volunteer's most precious commodity is time. And so I think that's the biggest obstacle you'll see with any of these ideas is you got to make the most of your people's time and your own time too, for sure.
Yeah.
For
sure. I think time is the enemy. You're exactly right. So again, the question is it more efficient to do a 4 or 6 hour training session on a Saturday when the people are receptive to it, alert and alive? Or, does it make sense to make a guy come to 20 sessions at 7 o'clock at night after he's worked all day, maybe in the heat, maybe in the cold, maybe he's mentally worn out, now he's left his family. So, you have that startup time for that class. You kind of have the peak learning time, and then but look, honestly, 9:30, I know, and when I'm teaching a class at 9 or 9:30, I'm talking to myself because those guys are like, I'm really tired. I want to go home. Blah blah blah. Maybe I haven't had dinner. Maybe like Tom, you work shifts. You're like, oh man, I'm really tired. I used to get really, really insulted when people would fall asleep in class. And I asked a guy one day, I go, dude, what's going on? He goes, man, I've worked 2 overnight shifts, blah, 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 blah. He goes, I'm just beat.
Yeah.
So that guy gets a good night's sleep, maybe on Saturday or Sunday morning, maybe he's a lot more attentive, and you're getting more for your time invested is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha. So the committee or the task force is going to be looking at some leadership issues, some training issues. Another big area that is open for a lot of discussion, and in New York, we really can't do it, but it's that pay per call. New York, we have low SAP. Sometimes people throw that answer out there. Oh, you want more members, you just got to start paying them. And I'd like your thoughts on that. And is the task force looking at that too? Or
we are. Look, money talks, BS walks. So the 20 and 30-year-old, and maybe even a 40-year-old who's putting kids through college, they need money. They need money now. Now, I get a low SAP check, $420 a month. It's terrific. I'm 68 years old. I don't need the money now. I literally do not need the money now. I needed it when I was in my 20s. I needed it when I was paying a mortgage. When my wife and I bought our house, we had enough money to pay the bills, and that was it. So then, as we both worked. So we did pretty well for a while. My son went to college. My son's college cost me $250,000. For 5 years, we were back like we were newlyweds trying to pay the mortgage, right? So the low SAP is great. I don't need the money now, right? Either when you're 60, 65, 70 years old, you're either financially sound or you're not.
And Jerry, if you could you just real quick describe for the listeners what low SAP is? Because some areas of the country don't have that.
Sure. Low SAP is, I forget exactly what it stands for.
Length of service award program. Length of service award program.
So it's essentially a pension. If you meet a certain number of points, you go to drills, you go to fires, you go to meetings, you make a certain number of points, you get a credit for that year. And I think it's at $20, Tom, a year.
$20 per month per year of service. Yeah. And then the municipality decides what age you can receive it at. It's 55, some are 62, some are 65. My department's 55.
Yeah, I think mine was 65 actually. So that look, when you're 25 years old, I wasn't thinking about 65.
Right.
They were the geezers, man. Hey, I'm never going to get there. And all of a sudden you wake up and you are one, but um, so I just saw a study, 35% of the volunteer fire departments in the country, in the US, get paid per call or per training. Now, years ago, I don't know how they did this, but this is going to be 30 years ago. I was doing a flashover training program in Malone, New York, up near the Canadian border. And they gave me a hat and said, Malone Call Fireman. So I didn't know what it was. So I finally asked the guy, I go, dude, what's a call fireman? And he laughed at me. He goes, we get paid per call. So again, not a really, booming economic area. So the way they kept their members is they got paid per call. Tom, I don't know why in New York we can't do that. If we want to keep these 20, 30, 40-year-olds, that's when the people need money. Let's give it to them now. So one of the things the task force looked at was the possibility of I don't know how you say this, getting your LoSAP money earlier and not getting it,
Right.
So
right. Yeah, that's something I'd like to hear from the listeners on. And if listeners, please get back to us. Definitely get back to Jerry. For those that are getting a pay per call or pay per training, does that motivate you? Is that working? Some people shrug their shoulders because it's such a minimal amount. They say they would do it anyway. So I'd like to hear about that. I've been on record of saying I really think I have the genius idea. So I'm going to give it to you, task force, because I honestly think that to attract the younger member, 18 to 22, 24, 25, in that range, good, solid tuition reimbursement or tuition relief at, it doesn't have to be a community college. You see some that are community college only, things like that. No, wherever they go to college, whether it's a percentage of the tuition, however it's, I'm not talking $500. There's all these scholarships out there and they're all very well intentioned, but my daughter goes to St. Bonaventure and I'm paying what you were paying. It is not cheap. And so I'm not talking $500. I'm talking good, solid, decent amount of tuition assistance, reimbursement, wherever they go. And then to retain, and the studies show, and my department will back it up personally with my own department, you start losing members in their 30s and 40s because of the demands of life, their job. They've been promoted a few times now, or they're moving up. The children are in sports and school events and traveling for little league or whatever it is. So but you want to keep those 30, 40-year-olds because they're, strong, good firefighters. They've been trained now. Maybe they're serving in good offices in your organization. So how do we keep them? Good, solid tax breaks, property tax breaks. I think that's, to me, now, that being said, that's going to put an onus on the departments to make sure that their people are meeting minimum qualifications and requirements, and not everyone gets a pass. You're going to have people come out of the woodwork probably to say, well, I was a member for 10 years. It should apply to me as a former. No. This is to keep active members in our organization, trained active members. And I really think that might help. I really do.
I do too, Tom. Money talks, and time is the enemy, and time is the link to money, and all the reasons you just said. So, I think that's the other thing that people need to understand, that firefighting is dollars and cents, not CENTS, but SENSE, sense, common sense. So for example, let's think about ISO, right? Like my department my pretty little village just spent $2 million for 2 new apparatus. We bonded $2 million. I could not get anybody up to the mayor to be interested in, does this improve our fire insurance rating through ISO? So again, that's one of the key training points. A department wants more apparatus. Well, does that benefit the homeowner by reducing his fire insurance enough to make it worthwhile? So what you'll find is a lot of times if you meet the ISO criteria by spending money and improving your fire department, it improves your fire insurance rates and it's better for the commercial and the residential fire insurance payers in your town. So again, Jerry can say, oh, we got to have a ladder truck. We got to have a ladder truck. Well, when we got a ladder truck, our fire insurance ratings went down and saved everybody money. And if you look at it, the commercial fire insurance payers save a lot every year. So again, that's kind of technical information that the captain, who's now going to be chief next year, or assistant chief, whatever, they need to understand. And not only the line officers, but and in firehouses, I think there's two sides. There's the mission side, suppression and rescue, and there's what I call the business side, which is everything else. So the business side needs to understand that, and the tactical side needs to understand it as well. Because if they tactically think they need a new ladder or need a ladder truck or tanker or whatever it might be, now they can justify it, and sell it and be an elite organization because they're spending money properly and they're not just a bunch of drunks hanging out by a red truck,
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Actually, I was in just this weekend in Missouri, or someone used that exact strategy for a new vehicle that they got. They went to the town board, municipal officers, and tried to explain ISO and how it worked. And they did a study and showed how it would save people on their insurance rates, and it was substantial, and they were very successful. And I think if you just keep saying we need a new rig because the old one, the one we have is old, and if we don't get it, people are going to die, a lot of citizens and business owners are willing to roll the dice like insurance. You're either got good insurance or you don't, and you roll the dice. But you start showing them the money, we're going to save money, you might get their attention a little bit more. So you think understanding ISO is important. Another thing that maybe is in that outreach program, that training that we need our officers to get and understand. Now, I've had people tell me ISO doesn't mean anything. It's not used anymore. But you don't agree with that at all, right? You've seen it.
Yeah, that's what the fire insurance companies use to set their fire insurance rate. For if you're a house, you're paying fire insurance. If you're a renter, you may be paying fire insurance. And certainly if you're a business owner, a property owner, you're paying a lot of fire insurance, So, it's just dollars and cents, SENSE, not CENTS. So,
Right.
Yeah, important stuff.
Jerry, is there anything that we missed? I know this task force is tasked with six main areas, from training and using community colleges and leadership training and outreach programs for delivering the information to firefighters, maybe as part of an outreach program where they go around the particular states and people can go on weekends, using a military type training and recruiting as well. And anything else that you want to talk to the listeners about, or want them to bring back to you?
Yeah, well, I'd like them to reach out to me if you guys have successful recruiting or retention programs. My email is the letter J for Jerry, my last name, Knapp, KNAPP, numerals 23 at AOL. Again, it's jknapp23 at AOL.com. My cell is 845-558-0489. I say again, 845-558-0489. Call me. If I can help you. Two, if you've got some ideas you want me to get through the task force. There's one other thing I just want to talk about real quick.
Go ahead.
That's short-term solutions. Ed Dolan from the Catskill, New York Fire Department has a great program going. He's a couple-time chief up there and a student of the game. And I have a lot of respect for Ed. They have what they call a ride-along program. So they have firefighters from different departments that work in Catskill's first due area. So during the day, essentially when the whistle blows, when the Catskill Fire Department gets toned out, they allow these firefighters that work in Catskill to come to the Catskill Firehouse and ride along as a Catskill member. So obviously they have a locker, they have gear, their training gets vetted, just as Tom was saying. So they kind of meet the standard. It's not just a body. And Ed Dolan from Catskill Fire Department has found this works really well. And Catskill gets out, and those guys, for being in a northern part of our state, see a lot of fire. So it's worked out good for them. The other thing is, and Tom mentioned about college, we were teaching up near Syracuse a couple of years ago, and the ride along, they have a live-in program with college students. So there was a college nearby. So as I'm in the firehouse, I see these college kids and they're walking around kind of like they're very familiar, and they kind of like they live there. Well, they do. They live in the firehouse. They have certain privileges in the kitchen and stuff and that kind of thing. And they have their own private bunk room. And but when the whistle blows, there's certain times they need to be on a rig. Now, they need to be sure that they're going to school and they're not going to fires when they're supposed to be in school. But so that helps them helps the department staff the rigs during the day, and really 24 hours. So if you have colleges nearby, you got those young men and women that are anxious to help out. It works out good for them. They kind of have, free room and board, and you get bodies to go to fires. So short-term solutions.
Yeah, I had Ed Dolan on my show, I don't know, within the last year. And we talked about that ride along program because I thought it was so unique. Sometimes we have to reinvent ourselves. I have a line in my class, we'll never get out the door if we don't bring people in the door, and we got to consider new ideas. My department, I'm going to talk more about this in future shows. People, folks, this is going to be the beginning, I think, of a couple part series where we talk about these issues. But my department just launched a new idea as of January 1st. It's new for us. It's not new around in other areas of the country, but for 105 plus years, my volunteer department had a percentage requirement for members. You had to make a certain percentage of the calls. And if you didn't, then there were steps to put you on probation, et cetera, et cetera. As of January 1st, we rolled out a new hours program where instead of having to make a certain percentage of the calls, you can sign up and do whatever the minimum number of hours it is that we establish. It's like 280 hours a year. And you sign, we call it duty shifts, and you staff the firehouse, and that's how you make your points. It's brand new. It just started. I can tell you that we brought in 7 new members immediately. Ask me in 6 months how it's going. Ask me in a year how it's going. I want it to work. And I'll leave you with this. I'm very proud. I'm one of the commissioners. We had to sign off on it. Commissioners and older members have the reputation of always saying no, no, no. Not going to say there weren't several meetings that we had to hash things out, but I'm very proud of all this. And I'm the youngest commissioner, so everyone else older than me supported the program and said, okay. And here's why. When all is said and done with all of these ideas that are getting thrown against the wall to see what sticks, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? You can always change it again. So we said, let's see how this goes. Right now, there's 2 members on duty at my firehouse. Now, it doesn't mean we staff 24/7. No, it's just, hey, because my wife is working or my husband is working or I have childcare. And Candace McDonald says it so well. Dr. Candace McDonald, who does a lot on recruitment and retention. If you ever get to see a chance to see her presentations, why should we penalize our members because they're choosing to go to their child's soccer game or school play and not to that training drill or to that emergency call? There's got to be. So this is just a new idea we're trying. I'm going to talk more about it in future shows, but there's a lot of great ideas out there. Please get a hold of Jerry regarding anything we talked about tonight. Whether it's, training in a paramilitary style, if you have military in your area, going to them, talk about what works for recruitment, using the community colleges to talk to how to learn how to train our younger members and our older members and our middle of the road members, understanding the importance of leadership. And if you are getting elected or appointed to a leader position, go out and seek the knowledge. Go out and seek the knowledge because it doesn't come with that appointment and that election. Learn how to work with people. Learn that, hey, you know what? Don't fall under the trap. How did Jerry word it? If your only tool is a hammer, everything else is a nail. Then things like that. You do things like that, and then you look in the mirror and you wonder why no one's there on the drill night, or no one's there at the community detail, or no one's hanging out at the firehouse, right? Ride along programs. We know they're successful at Ed Dolan's department here. We had a good conversation on that a few months ago. Something to consider. Just another idea. Consider maybe weekend training. Jerry's studies have shown that people pay more attention, they're more engaged. You can get a lot more accomplished when they're there on the weekends as opposed to later at night. and so many other ideas, understanding ISO, and going to your community to talk about how replacing equipment um, can help with their insurance rating, and then long-term save them some money. And we got to get our state leaders in all our states to really consider the financial end of thing. I know we're volunteer, but maybe it's like I said, where they're not getting a paycheck, but we're giving them a tax break, a good property tax break or tuition break to help with the younger members. A lot of ideas out there, Jerry.
There are, Tom, and again, it's the how. So how, I think we need to be educating our people on how to do these things, and they'll run with the ball once they know how. Fire services has always stepped up, and I think we'll do really well.
And again, Jerry wants to hear from you. So please, Jerry, why don't you give your info again one more time?
Sure. My email is the letter J for Jerry. My last name, Knapp, Knapp, numerals 23 at AOL.com. And my cell is 845-558-0489. And just another plug for FDIC, guys. It is a tremendous learning experience. If you're a student of the game, please go. On Wednesday, I'm doing my tactical response to natural gas emergencies training, which will fill a huge training gap for you and your department. I'll show you some training methods you can take back to your department to get you ready to go to propane or natural gas emergencies. Again, it's the things that I didn't know that almost killed me 10 years ago. So hopefully we'll see you there at FDIC. Look us up. Tom and I will both be there. So and we'll catch dinner somewhere along the way, Tom.
Absolutely. And if I forgot to ask, what's the time frame with this task force? Do you guys have deadlines? Or you have to get a report back to somebody? How's that going to work? Just curious.
Yeah, good question. Typical bureaucratic fashion, we have a deadline of April 20. I think it's April 22nd, 2022. Which they're probably going to push out a few months, but because it's actual legislation, it takes it'll take us some time to get that deadline extended. So we actually don't know the deadline, but okay. I'll keep you posted on it.
So a great task force put together. Who's not interested in recruitment, retention, keeping members happy, putting together a high performing, inspired team? And I want to talk, excuse me, more about this. I think I'm just launching the conversation regarding this. So please contact Jerry, let him know your thoughts. Feel free to include me in those conversations too. If anyone has successful programs they want to talk about, please reach out to me. As of now, next month, I'm planning on having Chief Dan Krasinski on. Dan is a chief in the East Franklin Volunteer Fire Department. He's been chief for over 20 years. That's in New Jersey. I just happened to see a post he did the other day in his department. He was able to bring in 14 new members in 3 months. And I want to talk to him about that. Let's see what he's doing. And then he talked about the importance of not just getting new members, but keeping them. And he's got some ideas on that. So I think we're going to get him on next. And then I'm going to be doing some other shows with some other departments too. Because let's keep this conversation going, people. We need to reinvent ourselves. We can't be afraid of change. We can't be afraid to try new things. Yes, it's easy to sit back and always point fingers at other people, whether it's we're not getting the results in our firehouse, or we're not getting the equipment we need, or we're not getting members. But let's look in the mirror and see what we can personally do to move our organizations forward. So I appreciate you listening in today. Thank you so much, Jerry, for being here. And as always, thank you to Fire Engineering and Chief Bobby Halton and Clarion Events for supporting the podcast. Honored to have you listening in. I'm glad that you chose mine, and I'm going to commit myself again for 2022 to continue focusing on these important topics. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, please go to my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page or Instagram or Twitter. My personal email, tamerrill63 at AOL.com. Again, it's tamerrill63 at AOL.com. Merrill is Merrill. And I also have a YouTube channel with all these podcasts if you'd like to listen. So thank you so much for joining tonight. If you pre-recorded it and listen later, that's great. I truly appreciate it. My next show will be Tuesday, March 22nd. I hope you'll be listening in. And again, I think we're going to continue talking on this topic and focus on this topic. And we'll talk about what it takes to put together the successful department in terms of membership, and a department not simply with a lot of members, but focused on the job and committed to the department too. So that's what we're planning on doing. I'll keep you informed on my department's new program, the Hours program, which so far has been very successful. So thanks for tuning in. Stay safe. And folks, please remember, true professionalism is not defined by a paycheck. And your residents are owed professional service delivered by professional firefighters representing a professional organization. Thank you very much. Take care.